A show based on the facts, honesty, the man, the myth, the legend, ChristiTutionalist Joseph M. Lenard.
Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP. I am your host, Joseph M. Lenard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show! Hello, everyone. A brief intro into Saturday, Season 2, Episode 96 in April of 2025. Let me look down at the calendar. April the 19th is the original drop date. This is not going to be a normal Saturday monologue, but it's also not going to be a normal I interview somebody else, which would normally be a Wednesday drop on a Saturday. Today, as Monty Python would say, and now for something completely different, right? Today, I am presenting Don McCauley of The Author's Show, interviewing me about Constitutionalist Politics II book. So, gonna be a little different. Here we go.
Welcome to The Author's Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming program author Joseph M. Lenard, and he is the author of Constitutionalist Politics II. Before I bring in today's guest, a quick reminder that selected interviews are available at our website, as well as on major platforms like Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and many more. Joseph, how are you?
I'm doing good, Don. How have you been?
Good. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
As you know, when we talked about my Terror Strikes book, I always say, and had my character in there say, things could always be better, but they could often be worse, right? So a philosophy to live by. But I'm born and raised in Southeast Michigan. Even though I hate the winters, I do choose to stay here.
So tell us about your book.
Ronald Reagan in 1976 was asked to write at the bicentennial something for a time capsule for the tricentennial. And he thought about it and said, if we continue to fail our republic and future generations, they won't have the freedom to dig up that time capsule and read about the freedoms we fettered away, because they won't have them to be able to talk about or read about our freedoms. And therefore, I decided I needed to remind people why indeed we are a constitutionally limited republic, not a mobocracy that is leading us into this INEPTocracy and CLEPTocracy of today, and we cannot allow it to further erode.
Now, who did you write your book for specifically? Who's your target audience here?
Well, it's a broad one, male and female, young, middle-aged, and old. I mean, I didn't do that with the intention of, oh, hey, obviously you want to sell to as many as you can. That's not the intent there. The intent was getting information to as many people, like older folks like me who have forgotten a lot of our history, and a lot of our younger generation who have purposely, willfully, and malice aforethought not been taught our real history so they can be molded to indeed take us away from our limited republic towards that INEPTocracy, CLEPTocracy, Mobocracy. Like the joke goes about two wolves and a lamb voting who's on the menu for dinner. That is exactly why we are not a mobocracy.
So, could you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that you would say runs throughout your book?
Yeah, the old adage, and I don't remember who coined it, right? Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. I like to say history may not exactly repeat, but it sure does rhyme a lot. And the natural state of humanity has always been a limited number of people lording over the masses, and never before has there been a nation like ours that have lifted more people out of poverty and given more people a greater good of freedoms, of individual rights over collectivist rights of the past. And as we learned at the failure of the Bradford colony, our founders learned the failings of warping of biblical community to worldly forced communism that fails because it fails to understand human nature.
So if you had to choose, what would you say is the single most important idea you're sharing in your book that's really going to add value to the reader's life?
Well, again, our nation being a Judeo-Christian foundation nation, and you don't have to be religious of either of those faiths or any faith at all to understand the human nature aspects of that creation and understanding. As Jesus said, the poor will always be among you. That wasn't an economic statement or a political governance statement. It was a human nature statement. There will always be those who will seek power and control over others, and there will also always be those unwilling to do but the bare minimum to get by, who indeed will then team up to steal from others. Hence that INEPTocracy, CLEPTocracy, Mobocracy, our founders sought to avoid.
Now, if you were asked to compare your book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
Oh, that's a tough question, because, and I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, that I'm not really aware of many or any other books like the way I've laid out my books, to present information in chunks to get you to want to think for yourself, as opposed to the indoctrination factories desiring to get you to think or feel a certain way. But to think for yourself, learn, and go deeper into the information I'm presenting, learning beyond that for yourself, because those who seek power and control or wanting to steal from you don't want you educated. An educated mind that can think for itself is a danger to those who seek power and conquest.
Now, you've been writing for a lifetime. Why did you choose to write this book now?
Well, it was just recently that I had heard that Reagan speech, because we are coming up, of course, on the 250th anniversary of our nation in 2026. And he was talking about 2076, the tricentennial. So I thought, as he outlined, if we continue to fail our future generations, they're not going to know. So this is my letter to the tricentennial, in the hopes that our people now will read it and indeed preserve our republic, as Franklin said, a republic if you can keep it, or it'll all be lost before 2076.
So if you had to choose a genre for this book, what would it be?
That's another tough one. It's nonfiction, of course, but from there it's education, it's faith-based, but again, you don't have to be of a particular faith to understand. You have to put yourself in the mindset of the theists of the time. They weren't anti-theists. They were godly people, whether they believed Jesus is their savior or not, which is why we are a Judeo-Christian ethos foundation, which of course then lends itself to politics. And you should never talk about faith or politics. Well, that only comes from the mind of someone who is afraid of both understanding of faith and politics. So they want to keep people quiet about that. So they all relate. Jesus was involved in politics. Do people not remember the overturning of the tables?
Now, you said that this book is second so far in a series based on something else. What does that mean?
Yeah, the first Constitutionalist Politics book came out in July of 2023. Because I had just started my Constitutionalist Politics podcast in June of 2023, and I was already amassing material so that the show would complement the books and the books would complement the show. You would have either or preferably both as a location to go for information. But putting it in writing, of course, was important for all posterity, as the online internet podcasts will eventually all be gone.
So what makes your book relevant today?
People are forgetting. They think the past, 250 years ago, that was so long ago. Well, human nature hasn't changed in those 250 years or 2,000 years since Christ. And even before that, there are the same different classes of people, which is why Jesus said the poor will always be among you. And it wasn't about economics or politics per se, but human nature, as I said, that there will always be classes of people seeking to lord over others. There will always be classes of people who are unwilling to do but the bare minimum to try to get by. And that's where that comes from. We are biblically, through biblical community, free will, to be our brothers and sisters' keeper. But the Bible makes the distinction between a brother or sister who is unable versus one who is not really my brother or sister. I have no obligation to if you are unwilling to do anything for yourself. And those lessons have seemingly been forgotten, as a lot of modern Christians just want the sit around the campfire singing Kumbaya all the time, Jesus, and leave out those tough love parts of the Bible that our founders understood and learned from.
So have you had any feedback yet from readers?
I mainly get my feedback through my Constitutionalist Politics podcast show, and it's, of course, mixed. I mean, there's people who love it. There's people who indeed say, you know what, you're right. I hadn't really thought about that, because unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there teaching the feel-good doctrine, the kumbaya doctrine, and leaving out all that tough love parts of the Bible that are still as relevant today as they've ever been. And they needed to hear that, to reawaken them and get them back in their Bible and read those tough love parts that they're not hearing from others other than me, seemingly. And of course, there are people who indeed want, like Rand, Atlas Shrugged, ride in the cart and eventually There's too many to be pulled in the cart, people able to pull the cart. They want this message squashed because they, of course, want to continue just riding in the cart, that INEPTocracy rather than a meritocracy where they have to earn their way to getting things.
So what can we expect to see from you going forward?
Make probably another book based on CTP, as I call it for short, Constitutionalist Politics. Also, probably some fiction-related items also. I have so many things going on. A lot of my books come out of a dream. I had a dream last night equating the color green with green mean go, and let my people go, thinking of Exodus. We need freedom, green equating with freedom. And I'm not sure how I'm supposed to put that into a book, but I'm ruminating on that thought.
So in your opinion, who should buy your book?
I don't mean to purposely paint it with the broad brush that it's for everybody. But indeed, it really is. I wouldn't say that if it weren't true. People my age who have children or grandchildren need this book so they can work through these issues with their children and their grandchildren and our grandchildren and nieces and nephews and cousins all need to remember where we came from to understand why we are going down the wrong road now. Not that our nation was ever perfect and ever will be, because they are run by men, human, frail, imperfect people. Nothing is ever perfect, but we must strive for the best good we can provide.
Do you have a website?
Yes, I have josephmlenard.us, and even though my name looks French, it's not Lenard, it's Lenard without an O, so that's Joseph M. Lenard without an O, .us.
Well, this has been just great. Our guest today has been Joseph M. Lenard, and he is the author of Constitutionalist Politics II. Joseph, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me again, Don. I really appreciate it.
This is Don McCauley, wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. Go out there, buy the book today, and please share this interview with your friends so they too have the opportunity to discover our guests and their work. The Author Show can be accessed at any time at theauthorshow.com, and whether you're an author who would like to be featured or a reader in search of new books to read, The Author Show is a great place to start. Check us daily as we continue to introduce wonderful authors of very interesting books on The Author Show.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. Find out more about authors and their work at theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.
The Constitutionalist Politics podcast, normally in conjunction and corresponding with articles, can normally for the Saturday monologue shows be found at BeforeItsNews.com, Substack, and find extended show notes including related links in the Buzzsprout episode edition of the Transcript. Thank you for having tuned in for Constitutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like, and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help.
Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM is your conservative flamethrower. Weekdays, Steve Gruber starts things off at 6 a.m. Gruber gives his perspective on the issues of the day. At 9 a.m., Glenn Beck blazes the airwaves with his nationally syndicated program. From noon to 3, it's Dennis Prager. At 3 o'clock, it's Wham's own Thayrone X. On the Edge, Thayrone tells it exactly as he sees it. At 6, it's The Dana Show, your conservative alternative. At 8, don't miss Joe Pags. Weekends are filled with conservative talk as well. Fingers Malloy, Thomas LeDuc, The Abolitionists Roundtable, A Moment of Clarity with Pastor Rick, Your American Heritage with Ed Bondarenka, Dave Janda's Operation Freedom, and Dick Kupke's Trigger Talk. You can even get links to Wham podcasts from Dave, Dick, and of course Thayrone, all from their pages on our website, whamradio.com. Keep it locked on Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM in southeastern Michigan, and whamradio.com anywhere in the world.